Welcome to the Hindu Daily. We've got quite a range of topics lined up for you today. We're diving into everything from pretty serious judicial warnings on ecology, right through to the shifting sands of global oil markets and even defense policy.
Yeah, it's a packed agenda. And what we're aiming to do is give you that shortcut, really, to being well-informed on these critical issues.
Exactly, connecting the dots between things that might seem separate at first glance.
And I think a theme you'll see emerge today is this tension, this conflict between short-term goals, whether they're economic or political, and, well, the long-term health of systems, be it ecosystems, markets, or even national security structures.
That's a great point. Let's start right there, actually, with that ecological angle. We've got this really dramatic situation coming out of the Supreme Court of India concerning Himachal Pradesh.
Yes, the court was looking at a specific development notification. I believe the SLP number was 19426 of 2025.
Yeah.
And the language they used.
No. It was strong, wasn't it? They said, and I'm quoting here, "Earning revenue is not everything. Revenue cannot be earned at the cost of environment and ecology." That's quite a statement from the highest court.
It really is. Justices Pardiwala and Mandavana didn't mince words. It sets a very clear tone about state priorities, or what they should be.
And then there was that frankly chilling warning. They actually said the entire state of HP may vanish in thin air if things continue this way. That sounds almost apocalyptic. Why such strong language? Is it just about building roads, or is there something deeper?
Well, I think it points to a deeper failing, specifically in how things are implemented. You see, the rules, the mandates for sustainable development, they exist. They look good on paper.
Right.
But the actual execution, the court sees it as perfunctory. That's the word the source used. Basically just ticking boxes without any real serious assessment of the cumulative impact.
Just going through the motions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the court clearly felt this was so serious, they actually registered a writ petition themselves in the public interest. That happened back on July 28th, 2025. So they're stepping in directly.
Okay, so what are the specific examples? Where is this box-ticking exercise causing the actual environmental damage on the ground?
One major area is a lack of proper cumulative impact studies for entire river basins. The court even raised this really interesting philosophical point. Does a river mean only its water?
Good question.
It highlights how these run-of-the-river hydropower projects, and we're not just talking huge dams, even smaller ones, down to 2 megawatts, how they collectively disrupt sediment transport.
And that sediment is crucial. Right?
Absolutely crucial. It's the lifeblood for aquatic ecosystems, for nutrient distribution downstream. Mess with that and you unravel the whole system.
And then there are the roads. The source mentioned the national highway construction, that Bilas Permanali Leia project specifically.
Yes, another prime example. The alignment choices. The way they manage, or rather mismanage, the debris from construction. It's described as unscientific.
Leading to roads failing.
Pretty much. Sinking, washing away, especially during the monsoon. And there's a suggestion that sometimes projects are deliberately broken into smaller pieces.
To avoid the big environmental reviews.
Potentially, yeah, to circumvent the need for a full environmental impact assessment. Plus, there's that 2018 rule about limiting hill road width to 5.5 meters because the slopes are unstable. Seems that's often ignored too.
So the picture is a development model that's fundamentally flawed for the region.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And the result is these disasters. Things that used to be maybe once-in-a-century events, they're becoming almost routine. All because the development path prioritizes, well, immediate construction gains over the long-term stability of the environment itself.
Short-term thinking literally undermining the ground beneath their feet. Okay, let's shift gears now. From the mountains of Himachal Pradesh to the volatile world of the global oil market. Crude oil. It really is like a financial lubricant for the world economy, isn't it? Over $3 billion traded every single day.
That figure is staggering. And it underlines why the current shifts are so important for everyone, but particularly for big importers like India.
So what are the big forces pushing and pulling the market right now?
Well, there are two main trends creating a sort of bearish pressure pushing prices down. First, supply has really surged. Technology is a big part of that. Things like shale oil extraction, ultra-deepwater drilling. They've unlocked huge reserves.
And OPEC Plus is producing more too?
Yes, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and their allies, they've gradually unwound those production cuts they put in place during the pandemic. That alone added about 3.1 million barrels per day back into the market.
Okay, so supply is up. What about demand?
Demand is slowing down. especially in the big industrialized nations.
Hmm.
And critically, in China. Electric vehicles now make up apparently half of all new vehicle sales there. That's a huge shift impacting oil demand.
Half. Wow. Okay. So more supply, less demand growth. That explains prices falling. Brent crude is down about 16% this year, currently around $61 a barrel.
That's right, around that mark. But here's where it gets really interesting. You've got these major reports coming out, mid-October reports, and they reach completely different conclusions about the future.
How different are we talking?
Diametrically opposed, really. OPEC, in their forecast, sees a tiny shortage emerging in 2026, maybe 50,000 barrels per day short, which suggests, prices might stabilize or even firm up a bit.
Okay.
But then you have the International Energy Agency, the IEA, and most independent think tanks. They're projecting something totally different, a massive supply glut next year, an unprecedented overhang of maybe 4 million barrels per day.
4 million barrels a day difference. That's not just a minor disagreement. That's a fundamental clash of outlooks.
It absolutely is. And it reflects different views on everything from global economic health to the speed of the energy transition.
So what does this huge discrepancy mean for a country like India? They're the world's third largest oil importer, right?
Exactly. And if the IEA and the consensus view are correct, if we do see this huge supply overhang, then prices could fall even further, maybe into the low 50s per barrel.
Which would be pretty beneficial for India's economy.
Hugely beneficial. The numbers are quite striking. Every dollar drop in the price of oil is estimated to improve India's current account deficit by about $1.6 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. It eases inflationary pressure, helps the government's budget. It's a significant economic tailwind.
So the takeaway for you, the listener, is that India stands to gain a lot if this bearish forecast plays out, but I guess there's a but.
There's always a but with oil markets. The crucial caveat here is that this relief, however welcome, could be temporary. This market is notoriously cyclical. It's influenced by geopolitics, by unexpected events.
So no room for complacency.
Absolutely not. India needs to keep focusing on strategies to manage consumption, to build buffers, because you just know that eventually prices will swing back up again.
Right. Hedge against that inevitable spike. Okay, let's move from economics on Earth to looking outwards to space, specifically India's ambitions in solar physics.
Yeah, this is about understanding space weather. Things like solar flares, coronal mass ejections, CMEs, these massive eruptions from the sun.
And why is that so urgent?
Well, because these events can have very real, very damaging effects here on Earth. They can knock out satellites, disrupt communication networks, even damage power grids. So being able to predict them accurately is becoming critical infrastructure protection, really.
India already has a presence out there with the Aditya L1 mission, right?
That's right. Aditya L1 is positioned at Lagrange point 1, L1, which is about 1.5 million kilometers from Earth towards the sun. It's already sending back valuable data, sort of the first step in this larger vision.
So what's the next step? The source mentions a paper by astronomers outlining a more ambitious future strategy.
Indeed. The core idea is that L1 gives us one viewpoint. But to get a truly comprehensive picture, and especially early warnings, we need more eyes on the sun.
More eyes.
Yeah.
Meaning more spacecraft.
Exactly. The proposal is to deploy instruments at two other Lagrange points, L4, which is 60 degrees ahead of Earth in its orbit, and L5, which is 60 degrees behind.
Okay, so like setting up observation posts at different angles. What's the advantage of L4 and L5 specifically?
They act like, well, the paper calls them two eyes. Having these different perspectives is crucial. But L5 is particularly strategic.
Why L5?
Because from L5, you can actually see regions on the sun before they rotate into view from Earth, or even from L1.
Ah, so it's like an early warning system. You see potentially dangerous active regions developing before they're facing us.
Precisely. It gives us crucial advance notice. And when you combine the data from L1, L4, and L5, you can do something really important. Calculate the 3D trajectory of a CME.
Meaning you know exactly where it's going and when it will arrive.
Much more accurately, yes. That allows for precise arrival time predictions, which is key for preparing satellites and ground systems.
This sounds like a major undertaking. Does the vision include ground infrastructure too?
Oh, absolutely. Handling and analyzing the sheer volume of data from these missions requires serious capability on the ground. That includes completing the National Large Solar Telescope. That's a big 2-meter class ground-based telescope.
And computing power?
Critically important.
Right.
You need advanced supercomputing facilities. Understanding the complex physics behind solar flares and CMEs involves running very heady, sophisticated simulations. You need the horsepower for that.
So the ultimate goal here is Self-reliance in space weather prediction.
That's the long-term vision, yes. Within the next, say, 10 to 15 years, the aim is for India to develop its own state-of-the-art models for predicting flares and CME arrivals. It's a big technological leap, but vital for protecting our increasingly space-dependent world.
A fascinating long-term strategy. Now, speaking of leaps in technology, let's zoom right down to the nanoscale. There's a really cool breakthrough in nanotechnology reported.
Yeah, this one involves making patchy nanoparticles.
Patchy nanoparticles. Okay, explain that. The analogy used was like building with Legos, right? You don't want all your bricks to be the same.
Exactly. If you want to build complex nanomachines or new materials, you need building blocks that have different functional areas, different domains on their surface, not just uniform spheres. They need to be patchy.
And scientists have struggled to make these consistently.
It's been a major challenge. But this new method, developed by scientists in the US and South Korea, seems to be a big step forward. They call it atomic stenciling.
Atomic stenciling, like an artist's stencil, but at the atomic level.
That's precisely the inspiration. It's a surprisingly elegant two-step process.
Okay, walk us through it. How do you stencil at that scale?
So first, they use iodide atoms. Think of these as the microscopic stencil or mask. These iodide atoms are designed to stick only to specific parts of the gold nanoparticle surface, maybe the flat faces, for example, covering them up.
Okay, so the iodide is the masking tape.
Right. Then, step 2, they introduce the paint. In this case, the paint is long-chain polymer molecules. Because parts of the gold are masked by the iodide, the polymers can only attach themselves to the unmasked exposed regions.
Ah, so you control where the paint goes by controlling where the iodide mask is placed first.
Exactly. And the precision is incredible. They've managed to create over 20 different unique patterns. This way, patches just on the corners or only on the faces, even complex web-like designs covering the nanoparticles.
That level of control is amazing, but what's the really significant outcome here?
The most remarkable thing is the uniformity of the patches they can create across many nanoparticles, because all the patchy particles are essentially identical. They do something amazing. They spontaneously self-assemble.
They organize themselves without being pushed.
Yes, into large, highly ordered, three-dimensional crystals. These are known as superlattices.
Superlattices.
Yes.
That sounds important.
It really is. Creating these kinds of complex, ordered structures from nanoparticles, especially ones that aren't just simple spheres tacked together, was largely theoretical before. This ability to make uniform, patchy particles that then build themselves into ordered structures is a huge step.
Towards what, ultimately? What can you do with these superlattices?
Well, it's a crucial milestone on the road to creating metamaterials. These are engineered materials designed to have specific properties that you just don't find in naturally occurring substances. Think about materials that could manipulate light in new ways, or catalysts with incredible efficiency, or maybe even platforms for targeted drug delivery. The possibilities are vast.
From atomic stencils to self-building crystals. Incredible stuff. Okay, let's transition now from that microscopic precision to something much more messy and unstable. The internal security situation in Pakistan.
Yes. The focus here is on the challenge posed by the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP. The violence levels are extremely concerning.
How bad is it?
The source indicates that 2024 was actually the worst year for violence in Pakistan in a decade. Over 1,600 people were killed in militant attacks.
Decade? And where is this violence concentrated?
Overwhelmingly in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, KP. About 63% of all casualties occurred there. That's the region bordering Afghanistan where the TTP is most active.
And what exactly does the TTP want? What are their core demands?
They have several key demands. They want the government to repeal the 25th Constitutional Amendment, that's the one that merged the former tribal areas, FATA, into the KP province.
So they want to turn back the clock on that integration.
Essentially, yes. They want those tribal regions de-merged. They also demand the withdrawal of Pakistani security forces from the region and, ultimately, the imposition of their interpretation of Sharia law.
These sound like fundamental challenges to the Pakistani state. The source suggests there's a complex history here that allowed the TTP to gain such strength. Why did the Pakistani establishment think the Afghan Taliban would help control the TTP after the U.S. left Afghanistan in 2021?
Well, the source calls that a naive belief. And clearly it was proven wrong almost immediately. Violence surged manifold within Pakistan after the Taliban takeover in Kabul.
So why the naivety? What historical factors created this situation?
There are a couple of deep-rooted issues highlighted. First is the legacy of British colonial policy. Pakistan, for decades after independence, basically continued the British approach of treating the tribal areas FATA as a kind of buffer zone. administratively separate.
Meaning normal laws and democratic institutions didn't really apply there.
Exactly. They never really took root. This created a kind of governance vacuum, a space where groups like the TPP could operate and eventually thrive. Second, there's the whole concept of strategic depth that sections of the Pakistani military establishment pursued in Afghanistan. The focus was often on influencing Kabul, and strong local democratic voices or institutions within the tribal areas were sometimes seen as, well, inconvenient for that larger strategic game.
So prioritizing influence in Afghanistan over fully integrating their own border regions.
That's the argument made, yes,
Yes.
that this historical focus created fertile ground for militancy.
The source also points fingers at more recent political failures within Pakistan, doesn't it? An inconsistent approach.
Yes, it mentions the period between 2020 and 2022, where the government seemed to swing back and forth between launching military operations against the TDP and then trying to negotiate peace deals. This lack of a clear, consistent strategy likely weakened the state's position.
And what about other political movements in the region?
Well, the source also notes the suppression of alternative political voices, specifically mentioning the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, or PTM. The PTM was advocating for Pashtun rights and challenging the security policies through peaceful means.
But they were suppressed.
Yes, and the argument is that by suppressing groups like the PTM, the political space for representing the region's grievances got left largely to the traditional elites, or worse, was ceded to extremist groups like the TTP.
So the conclusion is quite critical of how Pakistan has handled this internally.
Very much so. It critiques the tendency within the national discourse in Pakistan to blame external actors, primarily Afghanistan, sometimes India, for the TTP problem. They often use this term, fitna al-Quraysh.
What does that mean?
It essentially frames the conflict as an external conspiracy, a kind of anarchist plot stirred up from outside. The source argues this narrative conveniently deflects attention from Pakistan's own deep-seated internal structural failures, particularly the historical mismanagement and lack of genuine political integration of the tribal regions.
A tough critique, focusing on internal responsibility. Okay, for our final article, let's swing back to economics and policy, specifically looking at some unintended consequences in the U.S. President Trump campaign against offshore wind.
Right. This is a fascinating case study in how policies can sometimes backfire or have effects that contradict the stated goals. The administration says it wants to boost the U.S. maritime industry, shipbuilding, ports, etc.
But its stance against offshore wind projects is actually hurting that very industry.
That's exactly what the evidence suggests. Even a Republican state representative is quoted calling the policy counterproductive.
Okay, so let's see the proof. What's the concrete damage being reported? Let's start with the ports.
It's significant. Over $679 million in federal Department of Transportation funding, spread across 12 grants intended for port upgrades to support offshore wind, has been canceled or put on hold.
Can you give an example?
Humboldt Bay in California is a major one. They lost out on a huge grant, $426.7 million, which was crucial for developing their port to handle offshore wind components. The source says this loss delays their project by about 5 years, pushing the likely start date out to 2035.
5 years. That's a long delay. What about the shipbuilders? Weren't they supposed to get lots of orders for specialized vessels for offshore wind?
They were, and those orders are now disappearing. Maersk, the Danish shipping giant, canceled a massive contract worth $475 million for a specialized wind turbine installation vessel that was going to be built in the U.S.
Ouch.
And it hit smaller players too, a company called Blount Boats in Rhode Island. They've apparently just stopped building the smaller crew transfer vessels needed for wind farms. Why? Their quote was simple: there are no contracts.
Wow. And are existing ships being affected?
Yes. Some U.S.-flagged vessels built or modified for offshore wind work are actually being sold off now. Secor Marine sold 2 specialized lift boats. Another vessel, the Acadia, designed for installing rock foundations, has reportedly been redeployed overseas because the U.S. market dried up.
So the administration's actions are effectively shrinking the U.S. fleet it claims to support. What's their justification for this?
Well, the stated rationale is that they can restore America's maritime dominance faster and more cost-effectively by focusing on modernizing ports for other types of cargo, not offshore wind. They argue that speed and cost-effectiveness are completely absent in offshore wind manufacturing.
So they're basically saying offshore wind is a bad investment for ports and ships.
That seems to be the argument. But the reality on the ground is uncertainty in stalled projects. There's a developer, U.S. Wind, facing potential bankruptcy because of permitting delays tied to this policy shift.
Is there any hope this might change?
Some unions involved in shipbuilding and steel manufacturing are still holding out hope. They believe that eventually the administration might recognize the sheer number of jobs and the amount of domestic steel manufacturing that the offshore wind sector does generate, potentially aligning with their America First goals. But right now, it's a period of major uncertainty and, frankly, damage to the industry.
A real tangle of conflicting policies and unintended outcomes. That wraps up our deep dive through today's sources. Quite a journey, from Himalayan ecology to U.S. ports.
It really is. And maybe just to tie it back to that initial thought, if you look across these stories, the court warning Himachal Pradesh about revenue versus ecological stability, the long history leading to the TTP crisis in Pakistan, this situation with U.S. maritime policy. There's a clear pattern, isn't there?
What's the common thread you see?
It's the severe consequences that arise when immediate gains, whether it's revenue or perceived strategic advantage or scoring political points, are prioritized over the long-term health and resilience of the underlying system, be it an ecosystem, society's political structure, or an industry.
So, the provocative thought for you, our listeners, to mull over is this. When decisions are made purely for short-term benefit, what's the often hidden long-term price we end up paying in terms of structural resilience? Something to think about. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.